Hi, I'm Jasmine Haynes. I'm with Mississippi United Methodist Communications, and I'm here with Reverend Sheila Cumbus, who is the pastor of First United Methodist Church in Morton, as well as Lena United Methodist Church in Lena, and the board chair of Trinity Mission. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Let me give you a quick flashback as to the subject matter we're discussing about the events of August 7th, 2019. August 7th was the day of the ICE raid, the day that immigration and customs enforcement agents, more commonly known as ICE, raided several work sites here in Mississippi. ICE agents arrested approximately 680 people in the largest single state immigration enforcement action in U.S. history. This left many children without a parent to come pick them up from school or greet them as they arrived from their school buses, facing a sudden and traumatic separation from their families, not knowing why they were taken or when they would see them again. So, Reverend Cumbus, those were tough times for a lot of children and families. How did people pull together and become in community with one another?
Well, immediately the Hispanic community came out to support each other. And those of us who were not Hispanic, but understood and knew what the children and the families were going to be facing, went to give support and lend a hand however we could in those first few hours. Mostly we gathered at the plants and waited because some communication was happening with those family members who were detained, and they were hopeful that they would come back that night. So we waited in the parking lot in Morton, is where I was, and we waited for those family members to return on the buses that they'd been taken in. And some of them did, but many of them didn't. So just in the first few hours, we were just holding each other, praying with one another, and beginning to make contacts with people to know how to care for their needs.
I remember there were donations coming from all over the country and internationally. I'm sure that those may have weaned off as time goes on and the story leads the headlines of the news. Do you have any cases where people continue to give over the last 2 years? And were those donations enough to sustain the ministry that has gone on at your church and at Trinity Mission to help people?
Amazingly, yes, the money continued even with the pandemic, which, when we first started, we thought we might last 6 months. We might have enough funds to last 6 months, and the funds kept pouring in. Every time there was any kind of update in the news, anyone that did any kind of publicity about what was happening still encouraged people to continue to give. A lot of folks would send notes with their donations, and I would try to respond individually to those people to let them know what the money was going for, how many families we were helping, because every time I did that, they would in return, give and continue to give and share that with friends. So we continued all the way, even into the pandemic. We didn't stop assisting families with rent and utilities until April of this year.
Wow.
We continued almost 2 full years. And even now, we continue to feed people. So persons have been folded into our regular food distribution that we do here in Scott County through the We Care ministry. And we're still assisting persons through Trinity Mission in the funds that were given directly to Trinity Mission, still helping with utilities and food. So in a way, we're still going, we're still giving. And believe it or not, there are a few people who have such passion about this, they've continued to give. I received a donation yesterday for Hispanic ministry for ICE relief. There are persons who've committed themselves to that for the long haul, and I'm still receiving money. So we're still helping.
That being said, here we are at the 2-year mark since those events happened in August 2019. So, and I think you've started to touch on this, but if there's something you want to add, let me know. This being happened in August of 2019, and then 7 months later, the country was in a global country, the world, where it was facing a global pandemic. So, how has, or in what additional ways, did COVID further exacerbate the situation? And in what ways did the pandemic add insult to injury for those children and those families?
Well, just the sickness itself hitting many of our Hispanics and those who were able to return to work in situations that were considered essential. The chicken plants were considered essential. And so those who could go back to work went back to work, and they had working conditions that also lended to persons getting COVID in that working condition. So immediately we had families who were sick on top of trying to get back to work and bring some normalcy to their families. And of course we had deaths, and we tried to assist a few families with how to bury and where to bury their family members when there was no plans made for that kind of thing for them. And then even now, as we try to encourage Hispanics to get the vaccine, they're still afraid. They're afraid that if they show up somewhere to get a vaccine and they're undocumented, that they will be taken. So they're fearful a little of the vaccine itself, just because of all the untruths that have been shared about it. But mostly they're afraid that if they show up, someone will be there to take them away. And so try as hard as we may, we've tried to communicate that through our food ministry, that we can get you the vaccine, and what's required is only your name and a birth date. You don't have to do anything else. We've tried to give information about the vaccine in Spanish so that they're clear about what it does. We've tried to make sure every box of food that went out of here had mask and hand sanitizer and how to keep from spreading the virus. So the pandemic was just like, not only was it hard on everyone, it was doubly hard on them because they didn't have the resources or the freedom to find those resources they felt that most of us do.
Reverend Combes, what major changes have happened from the last time we reported on this, an update in December 2019 to now?
Well, we don't have the organization still intact to deal with every site as we were working early in the ICE raid relief. But we do still have individuals who are working at those sites through their own churches and just community organizations who are still trying to make sure that the persons who still need legal assistance are able to connect with that. Trinity Mission and the El Pueblo Mission has tried to do that in Forest, and still working in conjunction together to try to make sure people get accurate information and still have availability of legal assistance. We had a remembrance this past week at El Pueblo with a few persons in the community to recount the goodness of God in those first days, and then the goodness of God throughout the entire time to get us through. We did have a lot of people who have left our community, and then some who are still struggling to, believe it or not, get their families back. And so they're still separated, a few, and I don't have access to that information completely, but I do know that there are families who are still separated. So this is not something that's ended. It's not all gone away, and it won't be. I mean, we still face and still try to speak with representatives and make influences where we can to change policies that will help people who really want to be legally here and documented in ways that they can work to be able to do that. So now we're just still working at the regular things that were a part of our struggles as a community, and that is language barriers and trying to help with help teach English, just the normal everyday functions of life that need assistance, we're still trying to do those same things.
So how many families are you still working with in comparison to the number that you started with approximately 2 years ago, when the ice raids happened?
Yeah, we started out with 232 families in Morton. And now I would say we're regularly assisting about 45 families. And that is with food mostly. We have very few that we assist with financial aid as far as utilities. No more rent. We don't do rent assistance, but we are helping some with utilities and most of them with food.
Looking back over these 2 years, how has this experience built connection for you? And how have you seen it build connection and consensus building with the community?
Jasmine, I wish I could say it had done more than it has. I wish I could tell you that we're at a really good place and we have equal representation in the city with persons who are fully engaged and working on these issues together, but that's not the case. I think there are a few people who continue to try to push toward involving our Hispanic community in the leadership of our city and our county so that people can have a voice. And we are working toward that. But I won't say that it's the top of the list for most people. This is one of those issues, especially in the political climate that we have, that is not a popular thing to talk about. And so it takes a few people who just continue to be passionate to raise concerns and issues and to keep pushing people toward an inclusive way of engaging and dealing with the issues that face us. So just trying to hold people accountable. And I've spoken in the last 2 weeks, and one at Lions Club and one at the Rotary in Forest and in Morton, to try to say to the leaders of our community, it is your responsibility to help make a place that is safe and good for all people. And so let's engage with the right people and involve the people we need to, include the people who need to be at the table with us to work on these issues. And that includes the businesses who employ our Hispanic community. So I just think that's going to be a continual work. I will say that at least eyes are opened, maybe more than they were. And injustices have been seen and brought to the surface. And so people cannot just hide from that anymore. And so I think there is at least conversation more than there was. I just keep praying that God is going to continue that good work through the people he chooses to use through it.
Well, you mentioned that you would get letters with the donations. And I remember during that time, we got letters as well coming to the conference office. I know you got some at Ground Zero. And we had all these just heartfelt handwritten cards from conferences, from churches, from individuals, from Sunday school classes.
Right.
Just a lot of here's a retiree from the Minnesota Annual Conference. It was just from all over. And I think it's such a testament to what is wonderful about being a part of United Methodist Connection, because you realize that we are all connected, and it doesn't matter if you're at a small church or a big church, you can have a big impact. And so people said, you know, I'm just me, or I'm just this class, I can give this. So the donations ranged probably in number, but the heart of the giving was the same. It was all very cheerfully generous. So all that to say, what would you like to say if you had an audience of all the donors who helped over the past 2 years?
I would say there are no words to thank the people who generously, and I know some sacrificially, gave to make sure people had a place to live and food to eat, that from the youngest, which I remember one child being a birthday that he wanted to, all of his birthday gifts, he wanted to come to the Hispanic ministry. So that's what we got from a 9-year-old who sent his birthday gifts.
Wow.
To an elderly group of women who were as seniors in the senior citizens home, who discovered what we were doing through the United Methodist Church and said, can you do now get this, a conference call with us? Those little ladies wanted to talk to me about what we were doing. They cared so much. Youngest to the oldest, I've seen people who poured out generously upon other people the love of God through their gifts. And you're right, the United Methodist Connection is something that cannot be understated. It was vital in what happened here, and it continues to be. And I think the United Methodist Church, because of its history, heritage of mission and justice, and just compassion in response to any kind of crisis, has always been something that people look to be able to give. It's been an avenue that's trustworthy and fruitful, and it was here. And so every person who gave the smallest contribution to the largest, which we had some in excess of $25,000, were people who love people. They love all people. And that's what we need more of, is people who love all people and respond with compassion to the needs of all people. The thing that I hope is this never happens again. I hope for a world that will be different. I hope for leaders who will not just make policy, but will know people and their lives and stories. I thank the people who rallied around this, but this doesn't need to be forgotten. Our history in the US should not have this kind of story in it, and it's unfortunate. But I hope and pray that we will become more compassionate, more willing to work together. And I'm grateful that I had the opportunity. There's no doubt I was here for this place and this time, and I'm thankful I was able to be here.
Thank you so much for taking this time and answering these questions. And if anybody would like to learn more, there was a more detailed, in-depth, contextual piece done on this called ICE Aftermath. There'll be a link below in the comments where you can watch that if you'd like to learn more. Again, I can't thank you enough, Reverend Cumbas, for taking the time to be with us here today. And I want to thank all the gracious givers who were ranging from faith communities and size, Sunday school classes, educators, individuals, and just everyone from around the country who just gave generously to help children and families in need. I pray that you have a great day. Peace and blessings.